Prime Minister, you've announced the Strategic Defence and Security Review today. At your party conference, your Defence Secretary finished his speech with a direct message to the Armed Forces saying, "We will not let you down." Now, among the many decisions you've announced today, there are 17,000 personnel cuts. You've said there are tough decisions to take on allowances. What can you say to members of the Armed Forces who may be feeling let down by some of this?
Well, first of all, this government and me personally really value what our armed services and all the civilians who work at the Ministry of Defence do. I really value that they work incredibly hard to keep this country safe, to protect our influence and power around the world, and that job it's the first job of government. But I don't think we serve our armed forces or others properly if we put off difficult decisions. I know that some people will feel let down because there are difficult decisions here. We are making a small reduction in the size of the Army and slightly percentage-wise larger reductions in the Navy and the Air Force. So I know there will be people who do feel let down by that, but it would be worse if we put off these decisions and just said we're not going to sort out the Ministry of Defence budget, we're not going to take decisions for the future. I think this document, this strategy we've announced today, is good for our armed forces, good for our country, and I'll do everything I can to take people with us.
But there are people asking why, at a time when we are at war, couldn't defence like schools and hospitals be saved at least temporarily from having to cut its budget?
We are a country at war. We have 10,500 troops in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is funded out of the Treasury Reserve. It's not funded by the Ministry of Defence, and I give my guarantee that everything that's needed in Afghanistan will be spent in Afghanistan, in terms of the helicopters, in terms of the body armour, in terms of the counter-IED expertise. I will do everything I can to make sure the resources needed are on the front line. They will not be affected by what is happening at the Ministry of Defence. Now, if you look at the Ministry of Defence budget, what we've decided is it will actually increase in cash terms. Over the 4 years, it's a 7.5% reduction.
But in real
inflation.
terms?
That is much less than many other departments. I think it's right that the Ministry of Defence makes a modest contribution to helping with the deficit, but very modest, because frankly the defence of the realm is so important. And as I say, what's happening in Afghanistan is fully funded. And one other point, this is important. Any time at which the Defence Chief said to me, this decision at the Ministry of Defence could in some way affect our capabilities in Afghanistan, I said no, well then we won't take it. So for instance, refitting the Puma helicopters, that goes ahead so we can be absolutely sure we've got what we need in Afghanistan.
But for the people of the armed forces, it is painful change and uncertainty at a time when some of them are serving at the front line.
Well, I think that actually people working in our Army, Navy, Air Force, people at the Ministry of Defence, I believe they actually want a government that goes ahead and makes decisions. People want to be able to plan their careers. Now, if you want a career in the Army, you now know we're going to have a full-scale Army, 95,000 armed personnel. We're going to have more Chinook helicopters. We're going to have better communications. If you're planning a career in the Royal Navy, you know we're going to have those Astute-class submarines, the best in the world, a new nuclear deterrent. We're going to have the Type 45 destroyers, a new generation of frigates. If you're in our RAF, celebrating this year, the anniversary of the Battle of Britain, you've got the Typhoons now on stream, the Joint Strike Fighter coming on stream, the new A400M as the transport heavy lift aircraft. You know, we are making big decisions for the future of our armed forces so people can plan a career, and I want them to have a good and successful career. This now puts all of that on a sustainable footing, whereas before there just wasn't that sustainability.
But for Harrier pilots, say, facing the sort of Damocles of possible redundancy, they will be wondering why it's so important that we don't need Harrier now, yet we do spend millions for other aircraft in the future. Do you understand why that seems ridiculous to some people?
Of course, we thought about this very carefully, and this was the most difficult decision, but we faced a choice. The military advice is very clear that in terms of a ground attack fast jet, the Tornado is more capable than the Harrier. The Harrier's had a fantastic career. Those people who have flown and serviced those planes are heroes and heroines, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. But we have to make a choice. What's right in Afghanistan? The Tornado is more capable. We have more of them. It's able to take the pressure of Afghanistan for longer. So that is the right decision. It would have been an easier decision in some ways to stick with the Harrier and say, well, that will coexist with our carrier force. But it would have been wrong militarily. We need the Tornado in Afghanistan, and we should plan for the future, which should be around the Typhoon and the Joint Strike Fighter. And I think that shows real commitment to our RAF for the long term.
Your critics say this review hasn't been about strategy, it has been about saving money, and it's been a rush job as a result. I mean, the fact, for example, you've not said how many Joint Strike Fighters you are going to buy, doesn't that lend credence to that allegation?
If this was a short-term or a cost-driven exercise, why would we be spending £650 million more on cyber? Why would we be making difficult decisions to say we'll reduce the number of Challenger tanks by 40%, but we will actually order new unmanned aerial vehicles? It is a proper strategy-led process. Now, some people say this has been done quickly. I accept. 5 months is a relatively short period of time, but do you know what? We can't keep putting off these decisions. It's better, I think, for the future of the armed forces. The decisions don't get any easier. So why not get on and make them where you can to give people certainty about the great capabilities that our armed services will have in the future?
There is still some uncertainty, such as redundancies, reserve forces. Is that uncertainty fair on the men and women of the armed forces?
There was one decision I took where I didn't think that the Ministry of Defence had done enough thinking about our reserve forces. I hugely admire what our territorial army and what our naval reserves and others do, and I admire what other countries do to boost their reserve forces, and I want us to stop and have a proper think about this, and that's why I've appointed the Deputy CDS, the Vice CDS, to do this, and also a Member of Parliament who has himself served for a long time in the reserve forces. Other than that, I think we have been capable of making most of the key decisions, and they're in the document today.